Ho YouTube, and Merry Christmas to all of you out there. G3 Iron here. The question was often asked, did Santa Claus when he was gaming wear his Santa hat over or under his headphones? I don't know. Anyway, for this one I'm wearing it over. So today we're going to talk about lab enchants. Somebody did a great write-up as a result of using the twice enchanted prophecy and some of the profits that he was able to make off of it. So we're going to feature that discussion as well as talk about some ideas for changing, improving, or tweaking the present enchantment system from the Labyrinth. So first off, this is, of course, using POE.Ninja, the website. It's a wonderful economic overview, and we've got a POE tools video on how to use it and all the different features that are available on it. But this is simply searching for the different values of different helmet enchants. Now, you can see this is a very, very profitable thing to do if you are able to hit a wonderful top-tier lab enchantment on a helm. But before you stop everything else that you're doing and run off to farm the Eternal Labyrinth a bunch, or the Uber Lab as most of us refer to it, this right here is the list, the official list of all of the different Uber Lab helm enchantments. Now, I've tried to drop this so that way you can see it inside our search bar. You can see at the very, very top of the video, the very top, I have searched for simply the word eternal. All right. Control F and search for eternal, which is the game's official way of talking about the Uber Lab. But these are all of the helmet enchantments that are available in the Uber Lab. 493 times this word pops up, and the vast majority of the time it is popping up, it is because it is referencing a specific helmet enchant. That is a ridiculous pool to pull from every single time you try to enchant something in the Uber Lab. That is a very wide spectrum that you could possibly hit to hopefully get something, one of these top 10 to 15 that are worth over 100 chaos or so on average. Now, the first thing, the first word of the first disclaimer, or word of disclaim, as it were, is that you can see right here at the very top of the website, enchantment prices are more unstable than other categories simply because they're rarer. So if we wanted to go find a helm that's got the 40% increased Ice Nova damage enchant on it, there's probably not that many out there on the market. The same is going to be true for Tornado Shot Fire as an additional secondary projectile. Same is going to be true for Blade Vortex. There's simply not a whole lot of helmets out there that roll these. And so even though there's a value that's placed on it that's generated over here from POE.Ninja, that value can widely fluctuate. So for instance, sure, let's do a quick look for the Vol Blade Vortex enchant, and you can see right here using the POE.trade, we can see that some things that have got not the Uber Lab but the Merciless Lab enchant on them are as low as 35 chaos, but then it jumps up to 1.7x. Then you can see here, when we're searching for the percentage increased, you can see that there's just this wide variety of stuff like 5.5x, 7x, 14x, 25x. Like, there's just a huge variety of prices on these things, and the value of the particular enchant is also going to be based or depend on the particular base that it's used on. So for instance, a lot of people like to use Devoto's Devotion to slam things onto as lab runners because it's a general all-purpose helmet. Another one is Starkonia's is another one that people will use. But then there's also simply rare bases that have got a lot of life or resistances on them that people will buy up and then use for when they're farming the lab. Okay, so that's a word of disclaimer that these prices that will get shown oftentimes fluctuate, so you'll often want to actually do an actual search, which you can do that simply by clicking on the simple little magnifying glass over here on the right hand side of POE.Ninja to actually perform a live search using POE.trade, which is great. It's great to actually be able to go and look, but generally speaking, POE.Ninja is going to give you an indicator if you hit a lab enchant that is worth something, and then you can go and of course do a specific search for how much that something is going to be valued at, or what price point you should put it at. Now, I had mentioned a Reddit user, PenPaperShotgun. He also has a Twitch channel, GGzii, which his Twitch channel is, of course, down below in the show more info, so you can go and give him a follow and a subscribe if you would like. He does great, great work. I've actually watched some of his videos in preparation for making this video. I really enjoyed his content and his style and his approach, where he's actually showing us the economics of what it is that he's doing. So he ran the twice enchanted Labyrinth and the Prophecy. So this is the results of it. He shows off the pure currency that he's got right here. He shows off exactly how much exalted there is, and his mental status as well, which is dead, which was great. But the basic breakdown of this is using the twice enchanted prophecy. So this twice enchanted prophecy simply reads this way: you will be rewarded with 2 uses of the enchantment device on completing the labyrinth. So you go in, you buy up a bunch of these twice enchanted prophecies, and then you go run a bunch of labyrinths. That's exactly what PenPaperShotgun has done, and he made 65 runs of this. So that's a bunch of helms that he's getting to enchant. And the results are pretty compelling. So again, this Reddit thread will be linked below if you want to read exactly all of it. And then he's got a video as well showing all of his hard work that he's done and detailing all of the particular breakdowns of the economics of it. But this is a great idea for anybody that is running the lab. But this, of course, brings up the question, when we're looking back at the list of Helm Enchants, how valuable and predictable is this? This is just another RNG style sort of lottery ticket for making currency in Path of Exile. So one of the problems, of course, with running the Labyrinth is that there are these 493 different enchants that can come from it, but it is a good source of income because players that specifically design their character to run the Labyrinth can do it very quickly. And so I believe PenPaperShotgun did this in one particular sitting, in one particular playthrough. Now, of course, sittings and playthroughs for everybody is a little bit different in terms of time of day. For some of us, it's going to be an hour. For others, it's going to be 8 hours. But nonetheless, to be able to say, hey, look, here is a consistent currency generating way for you to play the game. Here's one particular option that it doesn't cost a bunch of money to do. It doesn't cost that much to get an Uber Lab Farmer set up. Of course, the more currency you dump into your Uber Lab Farmer, the faster you're going to be able to run the lab, thereby more chance at chancing a helm or enchanting a helm and hitting something that's going to be very valuable. So, of course, it is a not necessarily a direct put money into the build and money will come out, because there are 493 different outcomes that can come from enchanting. But at least by running the prophecy, you're going to have 2 shots at it every single time. And who knows, if you've got a good base, whether that's a unique or a rare base, then of course it may just have value in and of itself, and adding an Uber Lab enchantment, which somebody else doesn't want to do, running the lab a bunch of times for their particular enchantment, will add value in and of itself. So there is give and take here, depending on whether or not you want to farm the lab yourself or simply purchase it. But I think one of the general rules of thumb that comes into play here is, if you put the time into running the labyrinth, you're going to make currency back. How much time you need to put in order to make a proportional amount of currency out, that's different. But most of us that play the game aren't going to be able to see a 17x profit in one particular sitting. That's the reality of it. I don't know how you play Path of Exile. I can tell you that in my last sitting playing Path of Exile, I didn't simply make 17x. So in terms of just generating currency and playing Bank of Exile, playing PoE economics, this is a great way to make currency. Of course, he does hit a couple of very high value particular enchants, and you've got to wait for those to sell. But yeah, it's another example of, if you play this game and you play it to the best of your ability to maximize your play time, it's a great way to develop your own Bank of Exile and make currency. One other caveat and note of caveat here when you're running the lab is that when you're running the lab, you don't have any currency costs in terms of running the lab itself. The only currency cost you have is paying with your offering of the goddess. That's it. That's the only payment that you've got every single time you run it. Now, on any given day, those can fluctuate in price depending on whether or not the lab is a good lab to run, it's a short lab to run, or whether or not it's a bad day and it's a particularly long lab to run. But it's very simple in that you don't need to buy a bunch of alks, you don't need to buy a bunch of sextants, you don't need to have any particular amount of completions on your atlas, you don't need to have a build that specifically builds or specifically can clear this particular type of map versus that particular type of map. You're not dependent on divination card drops, you're just dependent on the lab enchants and the value of those lab enchants that they're going to drop. That's what you're dependent on. So if you're looking for a very, very simple and straightforward way to make currency, lab enchantments are one way to do it. Now, if you're asking, hey, Iron, how exactly profitable is it to run the twice enchanted prophecy? Well, this is a live search right now on the official Path of Exile trade website for twice enchanted. You can see that they're sitting at about 6 to 8 chaos is about where they're at. So you figure, you know, if your price input for every single run is going to be, let's say, an Offering of the Goddess plus a twice enchanted, let's say Offering the Goddess is running between 5 to 6 chaos, and then twice enchanted is between 7 to 8 chaos for anybody that's actually responding. That's about 13 to 15C every single time you're running the lab. Now you may be wondering, Iron, there's no way I would spend 15C running a map. Well, depending on the map that you're running and the tier of it, if you're running a high-end red map, the price of that map alone could be 15C, let alone all of the other ingredients that go into it, whether that's alching, whether that's using cartographer's chisels, sextants, as well as, of course, all of the time that's required for you to progress your atlas such that you'll drop enough maps and have enough quantity on your character to actually have serious returns for when you actually physically run the map. So I'm not saying that running the lab is automatically better than mapping. I'm simply saying that it's another way to go about making currency in the wonderful game that we all love, which is Path of Exile. So this raises another question, which comes up every time anybody discusses helmets and lab enchants, and this is a discussion that goes on in the Reddit thread a little bit. So again, if you want to participate in that, you can, of course, click on the show more info and engage with the Reddit thread there. But the discussion topic of lab enchants and is there a problem with having 493 different types of lab enchants, and if there's any way to improve that system. So a couple of ideas that are not my own that I've seen others float around are the following. One is simply to keep it the same. So Labyrinth has been out for, I believe, 3 or 4 years now in its current iteration. And there really haven't been many changes to the Labyrinth. And every single time there's a new league, there's no changes, no additions. The league content doesn't interact with the Labyrinth, specifically because from a design perspective, GGzii has said this, that they want the Labyrinth to stand on its own. They want the Labyrinth to be its own thing. They don't want a league mechanic to interact with it, to interrupt it. They just want the Labyrinth to be the same. So one idea is to leave it the same. Another idea is to change the helmet and enchantment system to something like the veiled system that we have in Betrayed League, where you have something of some options that are available for you. Maybe you place a helmet inside the enchantment device, and rather than just spitting out 1 out of 493 possible different enchantments, and that doesn't include if any of these are weighted, by the way, either. It's just 493 as a list. Rather than dropping it in and only having 1 chance, maybe there's some sort of veiled-like system where you could have 3 different options, and you could choose which of those options you'd like to enchant your Labyrinth Helm with. I think that's a pretty neat idea, and we see it working with Jun here in Betrayal League pretty well, as you've got options for if you're playing, whether you're playing and starting out a new character, or whether you're playing solo self-found, or whether you're playing hardcore and you need a specific crafted modifier on a particular piece of gear. It's really, really nice to be able to go, hey, I'm just going to unveil this, and look, I've got things that I'm progressing through, things that are scaling with the game, things that are scaling with my own encounters with the syndicate, and maybe I can target specifically craft something for nothing. It costs you nothing to craft that on, whereas typically if you were using an old Forsaken Master with the old system pre-betrayal, it would cost you something. It would cost you crafting materials in order to craft on specific mods onto an item. So it's a pretty cool system, the whole veiled system, and I think it's a good idea if there are going to be changes that are made to the Labyrinth, that's one particular idea that could be implemented to improve the Labyrinth and Helm Enchants specifically, is to allow for multiple different types of Helm and Enchants to be available to you when you complete the lab. The third idea that I've seen is to change to a prophecy-related styled system. So in other words, you would use a silver coin, just like Twice Enchanted or any of the other wonderful, beautiful prophecies that are out there. So you'd use a silver coin, and Navaldi would give you a prophecy that would be related to a specific helm enchant. This would be really, really cool because you could essentially target farm and trade, so make currency off of simply rolling your prophecies and then having a particular type of helm enchant be related to that prophecy. Now you could have this be very, very specific, where you simply pick out your list of helmet enchantments and you say, okay, this particular prophecy is tied to this particular helm enchant. The problem with that is, of course, then we'd have 493 more prophecies that get added, which would expand the prophecy pool every single time you try to seek a prophecy. That in its implementation would be problematic, in my opinion. So rather than having specific prophecies that are related to every single helm enchant possible, you could simply have it so that way when you roll the helmet enchantment prophecy, it would be something kind of like Twice Enchanted, where rather than saying you're going to have 2 uses of the enchantment device, which I think is great, you could do something similar to that, where you'll say this prophecy is going to give you an additional, rather than giving you an additional chance at using the helmet enchantment, we could say this prophecy is going to give you the ability to use a veiled mod, or to add a choice, 1 out of 3 particular styles or choices of enchantment. That particular type of prophecy would be very, very cool if you had kind of this veiled style system, but you gated it behind a prophecy related system where people had to spend their silver coins to hopefully get it, and they could trade it away, where it's not just a direct input output. Oh, I rolled a silver coin and I got the 2 tornado shot projectiles, or more duration on my blade vortex. Rather than simply adding a bunch more prophecies, you can make it still so that way it's somewhat of a chancing system, where you'll have 3 or 4 or 5 even different options that will come up, but you still have to make a choice, and there's still some RNG related. So those are some thoughts about helmet enchants. Hopefully you've got some thoughts as well, so feel free to comment down below. What do you think about helm enchants? What's the thing that you've sold? Are you a lab farmer and you've ever sold something with a helm enchant on it? What's the most valuable thing you've ever sold from the Labyrinth? Leave us a comment down below, and of course, if you'd like to change anything about the Labyrinth, or have an idea for how helm enchants ought to be changed, leave us a comment down below. Love to read those and interact with your thoughts. Merry Christmas, everyone.